Welcome back to the Philco 90 restoration project. I figure while I've got this spare hacked up chassis out, I might as well get a little bit more practice rebuilding those bakelite blocks using this new technique. Let's do this guy, which is a skinnier type of block than the ones we just did, there only being a single cap in here. So step one, we're going to take our drill bit and cut that little wire. Go. There is a set screw on this. I need to tighten that down a little bit because the drill bit slid while I was trying to cut through that one. But there we go. Now we need to heat it a little bit. This is a nasty new rubber wiring. That would not be there on the other. That will not be there on the other chassis. Going all around, getting a little bit warm. Okay, let's get our poker and give it a try. Oh yeah, and I gotta take that off. Kind of forgot that step. We need to take this out. And we poke. I gotta get that a bit warmer. Problem with these smaller ones is just, oh, there we go. There's not so much to hold on to. And there she is. Cool. Pop under your caps in, screw that back down, and we're done. There's just one bakelite block left in this old chassis. Let's just go for it. Now this one has had some extra junk added to it by the modifier, so let's clip this out. Had a little terminal strip here. Let's get that out. Now notice this one's a little different. Not all blocks have a grounded lug. So whereas this one clearly has a grounded lug and there was a star washer underneath, this one has a star washer up on top and there's no metal lug on it. So one capacitor, two lugs, and neither one is grounded. So in this case we don't have to look for that washer underneath. Next up we need to cut little beads out. Okay, a little bit of heat. You kind of smell when it's hot enough because you start smelling the tar just a little bit. Just a little bit. And gingerly check that it's not too hot to grab. And get our poker. Make sure it's right through the hole. Yep. And we poke and it's out. Wow. Yeah. Okay. I'm sold. This technique definitely definitely works very easily. Put a new cap in, mount it back down. No fuss, no muss. Alright, that's what we're going to do on the other chassis for sure. I will include a link to the seller. Again, this is not a sponsored plug by any means, and you could make your own tools just as well. It's up to you for what he's asking for this. I think it's, I would just go ahead and buy it if you can afford it. But basically you need a poker of about, I don't know, what is that, 1/16 of an inch or so. Something that'll fit through this eyelet hole. Just a straight piece of steel. Probably use a coat hanger or something like that. And to cut the leads, you could use a pocket knife, or in this case it's a titanium coated type drill bit with a nice little handle, so when this gets dull or breaks I can swap it out. Handy. Let's talk about tubes a bit. In particular, what type of tubes would have come with this radio originally back in 1931. Well, back then they were still using the globe type tubes, and by that I mean tubes that have a big bulbous glass envelope like these two. The transition year I believe was like 32, 33 where they went to the shoulder type. Collectors tend to prefer the globe. They look cooler, I suppose. They're rarer. They cost more. However, they are actually inferior. If you were wondering why did they transition, I mean, yes, these are smaller. There's a Type 45, but a Type 80 would be the same size, and this is an ST80. Notice it's smaller. But there's more to it than just size. Look what's in the top, over where the shoulder is. There's a mica disc in there. That adds stability. The reason they made this get smaller up top is so that when you put the elements up with that mica disc, it fits in there snugly. It holds the elements securely at the top. In these, there is no support at the top. It's only at the bottom. I've seen a number of tubes that were probably dropped, and the internal elements were bent noticeably. Even this one's a little bit crooked, but I've seen them where they're bent all over to where they're touching one side of the glass. So there's that. They can physically get damaged more readily. But also the elements can vibrate. Imagine the radio's playing, the speaker in the cabinet's vibrating a lot. The elements inside the tube will start vibrating, and you can get an effect called microphonics, where the vibrating tube elements actually feed sound into the set where there shouldn't be, and it can create some nasty feedback and distortions and so on. So this is actually better to use, even though I actually do prefer these. But here's a curious thing. That is the socket for the Type 80. Notice if I put this tube in there, let's see, I believe it goes this way. It's right next to that power transformer and actually touches it. I've tried to find photos of original 90 chassis, and it sure looked like there was a globe tube there. And you can put one there, it'll fit. And if you push it a little bit, you can get a little bit of clearance, but basically it's touching that transformer at all times. That can't be right. So it does lead me to wonder. I'll have to look at the other chassis when I pull it out. Was this modified a little bit over time? I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive this is the original power transformer. Everything's original. So what's up with that? Even with the ST type, there's still not a heck of a lot of clearance. And this tube gets hot. I mean, even that, there's only like 1/8 of an inch separation. So this gets warm a little bit on its own, but this right next to it's going to transfer a bit of heat to this power transformer. So that seems odd. And the audio output transformer is right here, so there's a lot of heat concentrated in this area. I don't know why they wouldn't have spaced that out just a little bit more. They probably didn't have room, but man, I'm sure they would have liked to have spaced it further apart if they could. Now, because of the clearance issues and because I do not want to damage any rare, valuable globe tubes, I will be using all ST type. That's Type 80, that's a 47 output tube. The rest, I think, are all Type 27s and 24s. Yes. So not a whole lot of variety there. And these just say plain 24. Well, there's a 24A that's definitely a superior tube. They redesigned it a bit, I think, to have less chance of oscillating or picking up external interference or some such. 24As are definitely more common, and I'll be using those. They're completely compatible. I realize eBay has some issues, but one thing it is really handy for is doing research. So I just fired it up and searched for Philco 90. One, I want to see if anybody's got an original speaker for sale. And I'd also like to see some photos of both the original speaker and some other examples of the chassis. Right away I saw something you guys should really be aware of, is there are some cheesy reproductions that have been made over the years that people will sell, sometimes unwittingly as antiques, or they know it is a reproduction, they just won't bother to mention it, like this one. All it says is a Philco R90, working condition pre-owned. Nothing about it being a modern reproduction, whatever. At least they have it priced accordingly. Because as you're about to see, even with the economy being in the state it is, the 90 commands a hefty price, like $600 for an unrestored one. I'd be surprised if it sells for that much, but, you know, I mean, here's another one that's just for parts or repair, $425. Turns on, $449. Now check this one out. I already did briefly, and that's why I grabbed my camera, because I want to show you some things to look out for. The cabinet looks pretty good. I will say that. Here, let's get a bigger photo. That is not an original knob. It should be a matched set of 4 rosette knobs, that being larger, the others being a little smaller. Don't think that's the original grill cloth. It's got a little issue up here, and I'm pretty darn sure it's been refinished because it's all basically the same color. There should be some variation. They use toner lacquers, I believe, on these parts to make it darker. Again, that's why I suggest if you're going to really be invested in restoring a radio, go online and at least do some image searches to find a variety of examples and use your best judgment as to what it should really look like. You know, that might be the original knob. So I do have a model 15DX that's got a small power knob like that. So you gotta do my homework on that. I know the one I have is all original, but there are some variations, especially with this model, because there are 3 basic revisions of it. Alright, this is what I really wanted to show you, the insides. So now that you've seen the ones I'm working on, I think you can see that this is kind of a mess. It's got a new power cord. It looks like they used one from an old iron. When it's got that stripy color, it's usually from an old clothes iron. Wiring is a little chewed up. The tube shields, though, man, I mean, these 2 are just flat out homemade. And that is a goat or a clip-on type shield that they would not have used for Philco. So all 3 tube shields are gone. That is probably an original capacitor. They call those Mershon types, and they came in copper jackets, and they're kind of cool looking. That is not original. But check this out. There's what I was talking about with that rectifier tube. That is an 80 rectifier right up against the power transformer. Tight squeeze, but I'm pretty sure that's what they came with. And I do believe that is the original speaker. Let's see if they have any others. And of course they don't show you the cabinet, or sorry, the chassis, I mean. So I'd be very wary of plunking down that kind of money. No offense to the seller. I just want to educate my viewers that if you're going to pay real money, you want to see the underside of the chassis. Let's check out this one. I think it's the highest priced one currently on eBay. Blurry photos, also not a huge plus. I do believe that is the original grill cloth, though. I mean, if you're going to ask $600, at least make an effort to not shake when you take a photo of the radio. You can see it's rusty. Again, I believe that is an original speaker. Wow, this is some of the worst photos I've ever seen for anything on eBay, let alone for something that's $600. Yikes. No, I would not recommend going for that one. That's some much better photos, that's for sure. I couldn't even tell what the knobs look like. Okay, and then there's this one. Yeah, that's what I thought. So this knob is smaller, but it's a rosette. So I think that first one we looked at, that might not be the correct knob. I do believe that is the correct grill cloth, a bit stained. And notice how this is darker. See if they got any better photos of it. So you can see where it's worn off. This has some color to it. That's how you can tell when radios have been poorly refinished, where they just stripped it and clear coated it. Almost all Philco radios, they put color in the finish. And often more than one color throughout the cabinet to give it a little contrast. This is great. And this guy took some really good photos. You can even see the hardware underneath. And see the old feet were worn off. But originally it had these metal cap feet, probably with felt pad underneath it. There should be washers, bigger washers underneath these. I don't think any of these are the original chassis bolts. They should have a hex head on them. I'm almost positive this is the original finish. Notice it's darker down here, a little bit lighter here, but even said this has some color to it. So that would be maybe a dark walnut, and this would be like a medium brown kind of walnut. Insides. This looks to be all original, very likely. It's early type caps, at least some globe tubes, and looks like an original speaker again. My cabinet is missing this arch. That's something I need to reproduce. Alright, that is what that's probably not an original shield. That is what the original tube shield should look like in both these positions. A little bit of notes. Oh, I stand corrected. What do you know? This guy has some servicing notes. Those two caps have been replaced. But they must have been replaced a long time ago because those are still pretty old-timey looking caps. It can be tough, as you can imagine, when something's 90 years old. This is serviced in 45. It can be tough to find a photo showing 100% originally what they look like. In fact, there's an effort now ongoing, or somebody's trying to get an effort going on the Antique Radio Forum for people to take photos of the underside of the chassis, top side, so we can kind of get a database going of what the stuff originally looked like. And here's one final one. $1,000, their best offer. Let's see what kind of photos we got with this. A little on the dark side. I'm sure now that this is the original grill cloth because almost every example we've seen has that grill cloth. Boy, some really dark photos. This one also looks, this is the most original looking one we've seen so far. As far as that, it even has a globe tube with the Philco paper label on it, and these are the two correct tube shields. Can't tell if those are the original caps, but they could be. Get some better lighting. And that's it. I'd be hard pressed to drop $1,000 on that. So apologies to the seller, but man, I realize that some sellers, they're not knowledgeable about this stuff. They may have inherited it. They're afraid to take it apart. They don't want to touch it. It's an antique, and generally that is good advice. But to drop $1,000, I'd want to know if there was a rat's nest or something underneath there. But hey, at least we got some great reference photos. So I'm sure it used all globe tubes originally. We know what the right grill cloth looks like. We know what the speaker looks like. Now over to this. Somebody posted a handy thing online. Data on all Philco speakers up through, I think, 35. And here we go. The 90H Series B, 90-L Series B, 147 as pentoed. That is what we have. H3, that's the speaker we need, an H3. There's a model number. And also we now know that the field coil is 3200 ohms. And we know what the output transformer part number should be. We know how much the field current should be, so we can check the resistance to the field if we wanted to. It should be 40 milliamps. Lots of good info. 450, that is the primary resistance that it should be. Alright. I do not see any for sale anywhere, so I kind of knew it was going to be a tough find. I'll try using the 20 speaker, and maybe I'll try rigging up that Utah speaker that's currently in the cabinet. I don't know. At least I know what to look for. Hey, look what just arrived in the mail today. I got a tip from somebody on the Philco forum that someone was selling a bunch of speakers for different makes and models of radios, and one of them appeared to be a Model 90 compatible speaker. Well, I took a gamble on it, and here it is. Now, I knew from the photos he posted there was an issue right away. Take a look at our Model 20 speaker for comparison. I think you'll notice what's missing right away. There's no output transformer. Alright, we can deal with that. There's a bigger issue. I asked the seller to check the field coil for continuity. That is the electromagnet here. He did, and unfortunately it's open. So we negotiated for a lower price, and I decided to go for it anyways. Why? Well, I'm hoping I can breathe some life into it. But first, let's take a little comparison. Take a look at differences between the two. So initially, I thought this was a Model 90 speaker, but somebody tipped me off about that. One way you can tell them apart is the Model 20 has a nut holding the field coil together. The Model 90 and the Model 70, I believe, uses this as well, is hammered together. That's unfortunate. Because if it had a nut up here, I could take it out and take this apart and repair that. Potentially much easier. So how was this put together? Apparently pressure, and there they ram the field coil down in there. I've heard if you happen to have a hydraulic vise handy and you get a hunk of metal the right diameter, you can shove it through, or perhaps with a bearing puller. Neither of which do I have, of course. Or get a hunk of metal the right diameter and just whack it really hard with a hammer, maybe. Or do what I did on a speaker a while back, which is to get these out. So both speakers have these. What are these? Rivets of some sort. I forget the exact name. But they're rounded over on the other side, and then they're designed to splay out when you ram them through. They have kind of a spiral on them. When I did it before, I managed to whack two of them out with like a nail set and a hammer, and two of them had to cut off with a Dremel wheel. Such is life. Well, the reason I really got it was the cone is in pretty darn good shape. There's a couple minor tears in it. I will get some glue on that ASAP so they don't get any worse. But otherwise, I can't tell if it's been reconed or not, if that's original. If it's original, it's in as good a condition as you're ever going to find one. And the reason that folks seem to say that this would sound better, careful with that, those are fragile paper cones, is if we look at the spider. So this has what became the traditional looking Philco spider, where it's kind of it's cardboard with a certain thickness and strength to it, and the speaker moves in and out, and that provides some tension. Well, look at this earlier version. It doesn't have that. It's got sort of just a thick paper disc down in here. This supposedly sounds better. Now, the other reason I got it is I have some experience with these, and I know they can be taken apart fairly easily because it's screwed together. So a bunch of sheet metal screws are around the perimeter. You take those out, you take this out, you can get the cone out. It's not all glued together. And then there is a vague hope, that the brake on the field coil might be just somewhere right in here. Also notice this is rather loose. I don't think it is on the other speaker. No. So, but you know, we can put a shim under that. It's actually quite loose. I'm not sure what's supposed to keep it in place. It looks they're cardboard shims up top, but they're super loose in both speakers, so I think there's more to it than just that. That should keep it from going up and down. I don't know if it's supposed to keep it from rotating, if there was originally glue in there or not. There's quite a bit of play in there. Anyways, it's wrapped with some like insulating paper, kind of like electrical tape sort of. I can carefully slice into this, and maybe the break is right near the outside, and I can repair it without dismantling this. Now, if I do dismantle it, there's potential for rewinding the field coil. And that was my original thought, is okay, you know, I bought this basically for you guys, to entertain you, to see if we can resurrect a speaker. I have not done a whole lot of speaker rebuilding or reconing or any of that. I figured it's a skill that I should acquire because I think it's going to be happening more and more. So I looked into what does it take to rewind a field coil. And I was a little horrified at what I found. Not the actual winding itself, that's fairly easy, and it seems that you can just use a random winding pattern. All that matters is the number of turns. So the DC resistance of this is something like 3,000 ohms. I forget exactly what it is. Well, I found somebody online who was in a similar situation, same speaker, and he was asking for advice on what type of wire gauge and how long it should be and how to rewind it. So that's where I found out that the winding pattern is irrelevant. And the way you can find out how much wire you need is take some of the old wire and try to figure out what gauge it is. And from there you can also figure out, well, if you know what the resistance is in total, you can find out what the resistance is for a given wire gauge per foot. And then do some math. Say it's 1 ohm per foot of a certain wire gauge. You know, you're going to need 3,000 feet to get 3,000 ohms. Well, it looks, as near as people could tell, it's gauge 36, maybe 35, and you need about a mile of wire, something in that ballpark. Or put it another way, it comes out to a bit more than a pound of wire. Now that it matters because they typically sell this stuff in 1 pound spools. So if you need more than a pound, you got to splice it or buy a much bigger spool than you really need. That's a problem. Why? Because this is where I was horrified. I looked up how much enameled magnet wire costs. Apparently 1 pound of number 36 wire from a decent reputable seller is like $45. Wow. So you take the cost of the speaker, whatever, say you paid $30, $40 for a speaker, and we want the field coil, double the price of the speaker for just that magnet wire. I thought it was going to be $5. If I'd known it was going to be upwards of $40+ just to get the wire to rewound this, I might not have done it. But let's hold out hope. So the one other time I encountered the same situation, I was on a Stromberg Carlson, I think, and I started unwinding it. Partly because I was hoping I'd find a break near the outside, and I was figuring I could guesstimate how long the wire is. And it was the first time I'd ever messed around with a field coil. I didn't realize just quite how much wire there is on there. There's an insane amount of wire on there. Okay, so on that one, I found the break about 20% of the way in. Now, I could have spliced the break and wrapped more around it, but you know what? I just kind of patched it off there, wrapped up with electrical tape, and rewired everything, and it played pretty darn good, even with a 20% loss in the magnetic field strength of the core. So I might do that here too, and I might be able to start unwinding it without taking this apart because they're so loose and there's so much play in here. You know, if I take off these wires, so underneath here, there's going to be, the magnet wire is really thin. And then they put much heavier gauge wire, and there's going to be some clips and some tape and maybe glue and stuff. I can feel the bulges right here. That's where they're spliced together. I can clip these off. So obviously I can't rotate it now because they whack into this. But with those clipped off, I can spin this around. So you know, I can start unwinding it and hopefully find the break without having to do anything with dismantling this. So my two big hopes are the brake is like maybe it's corroded right at the junction here, or it's just a few turns in or a few hundred turns in. In worst case scenario, I don't use this at all and just say screw it and use something else. But that's the hope. That's the hope. Now for the output transformer. I've been using this Hammond 125D. It's a push-pull 10-watt transformer. I just need a single-ended for the configuration I have, and 10 watts is a little bit beefier than I need, given it's a single 47 output. A 5-watt might do, or a 6 or a 7. They make these in a bunch of sizes, so I'll get the smallest one I can get away with because they will cost a little less, but also I think it'll be physically smaller because this doesn't quite fit the mounting holes. It comes really close to the lining up with the holes on the frame, but it's a little too fat. It bumps into the field coil a little bit. Cost $45–50. So yeah, if I go that route, a whole hog, and I rewind the field coil, get an new output transformer, this will be over 100 hours just for the speaker. By far and away the most expensive part of this project. Well, without further ado, let's see what we can do. Trying to get some of this outer coating off. It's pretty deteriorated, so I think I can just tear into it. It's paper based. I really have nothing to lose. Kind of reluctant to use any metal tools like that X-Acto knife because I don't want to nick a wire and make things even worse. Now we're starting to see magnetic wire underneath there. There it is. That's what all the fuss is about. Now, one thought did occur to me. It'd probably be too much to ask for, but when you buy magnetic wire, it comes in a spool. Hey, wouldn't it be great if it was the right length and the right diameter that you could just take the bobbin and just plop it on here and be done with it? Also, that would require both ends of the magnetic wire on that spool to be accessible. I don't know if that's the case. Alright, so I've kind of seen this before. So there's some protective, heavier tape under here, almost like a bandage type material. And then there's these heavier wires coming in. And just about there for one of these. So there'll be a fine bit of magnetic wire poking through, and I splice it onto the heavier wire. And protect it all with this coating. Kind of like unwrapping a mummy here. And yeah, I don't know if you guys can see that, but there's corrosion there, and that's, if you're lucky, focus. If you're lucky, that's where the problem is going to be. It's kind of powdery green a little bit there. And there's a fine little wire coming through right here. What I'm trying really not to do is damage it myself, because if I could fool myself and think that while I'm taking this off, if I break it, that, oh, that's where the break is, and I repair it, and then that's actually not the case, and damage is further inside, and I just created more damage. Whew, man, this is kind of nerve-wracking. exactly where that wire is coming through from. But one little tug in the wrong way, and I will snap it. This reminds me of fixing flyback transformers and TVs. I got the same problem. You got that high voltage donut with all the turns of wire, and eventually it's got to come to a heavy wire to be a cap for the high voltage rectifier tube, and those break all the time as well. Alright, so there's a one little wire. It's coming through over the top of that paper and then looping around and attaching to this. Now, if I was to put my ohm meter on that, this is an enameled wire and it's not going to be conductive. So I need to scrape away a little bit of that. Can't even quite see where they connect together. It's somewhere underneath all this stuff. Well, I'm going to keep poking away at it, tearing away at it, until I have something useful to say. Ah, here we go. That's where they connect together. So thin wire coming up from below, and then the long about an inch stripped off the heavier wire, and they wrap the enamel wire around it, and there's a little solder blob at the end. This whole thing is very fragile now because I loosened everything up. So one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take some very fine sandpaper or something and scrape that to get the enamel off, and then use my ohm meter and see if that did anything. If not, let me start digging out the other one. Alrighty, I dug out the other one. Finally found a little wire going down here. So, this is very nerve-wracking. What I want to try doing is scraping a little of that. Make some wires around here. Any indication of continuity. So when I go between this and this, and we have continuity. Well, that's a bad sign because that means the brake can't be there. It's got to be somewhere else, so this is not going to work. On the side, no. So where is the brake? I don't know. I'm gonna take a break for now and get back to this another time. What I'm gonna have to do is just bite the bullet, cut these extensions off, get all this paper off, and start unwinding and hope that the brake is somewhere near the outside and not like in the middle of it. The last part of this segment I want to devote to following up on some of the comments I've gotten. I've gotten a lot of great comments, a lot of great feedback, a lot of great insights, and I'd like to talk about a few of them. So one, there was a comment on the lighting being dim in here. To you, I realize it is now as I'm editing the videos. To me, it's perfectly fine. That has to do with the sensitivity of the camera versus the human eye. So I did dig up a clip-on lamp. I just got it attached to my tripod now. I'm trying to bounce it off the walls to kind of get some diffused lighting. So hopefully from now on you'll be getting better lighting. There was a comment about why am I messing with a field coil speaker when there's a filter choke in the radio. It uses both. I've tried to make that pretty clear. Power transformer, rectifier, dedicated filter choke, field coil on the speaker. They both need to be there. They are both part of the power supply. That's how it's designed. That's why we need both. If we can't get one for the speaker, depending on what I end up using, we're going to put a power resistor in place of it to knock the voltage down to what it should be. Grounding. I oversimplified things a bit. with my explanation. I am not a radio engineer. I do not have a ham license. And, I think that was pretty clear. So a few things. One, apparently an AM transmitter does not just radiate out of the top. The whole structure radiates. Two, the ground. The ground electrons do not literally have to make it all the way back. And in hindsight, when I thought about it, like, duh. Okay, simple example, satellites. Satellites broadcast. They obviously have no physical ground connection to the Earth. How about a portable radio? Obviously, you don't have a wire going into the ground with a portable radio. They work just fine. But what I did say is correct in that you do need a ground on this because it helps set up that electromagnetic field going through that antenna transformer, because you've got to get the primary coupled to the secondary, so you've got to get some action going through here, and the ground helps out a lot with that. So we saw the dramatic difference with this rebuilt cap. And then somebody posed a rather intriguing question online is, well, wait a minute. You've been talking all about how these caps complete a return path to the neutral, goes to the ground in the house, and everything's happy. Except, what have I been plugging this radio into the entire time I've been working on it? This, which has an isolated output. It's an isolated transformer in here. This does not connect to the house wiring. They are electrically isolated from each other. But obviously it made a huge difference. How is that possible? I looked at the schematic on this, and I don't see any path. There are no line filter caps in this going to ground or anything. The only idea I've got is what somebody else commented on the line too, is that maybe there's enough parasitic capacitance between the primary and secondary windings and the isolation transformer inside of this that the RF can find its way through. It's funny thing about RF, I mean, it kind of finds its way through everything. But what that means is, if I plug this directly into the wall outlet, or use a real ground connection, it could work even better. So, hey, that's an interesting possibility. And finally, I wanted to touch on the heavily modified chassis. A number of you have expressed a desire to see it live again. I'm sorry to disappoint, that's not going to happen. One, I've already scavenged stuff out of it. Two, when I got it, not all the tubes were populated. I don't know what went into all those tube sockets, the rebuilt ones. I don't know what output tube it had in it. I don't know what driver tube it had in it. Yeah, I can make educated guesses. I can reverse engineer it, but I don't want to. I've got way too many projects. I got other stuff I want to move on to. I don't like the way some of the stuff is done. I don't like the hacked-in filament transformer. It's just going to be a parts chassis. Sorry to disappoint. All right, I'm going to leave things off here. We are going to pick up on this chassis. We're going to try to tackle a few things in the next installment. We're going to try to figure out why can't we get the volume to go down all the way. We're going to see if we get the automatic volume control to work better. We're going to rebuild the rest of the bakelite blocks. We're going to work on these box capacitors, and yeah, we'll take it from there.